Hi, Steve Casty here. I just want to talk about downloading, installing and getting Python going in IntelliJ IDEA. So I'm going to download the community edition of IntelliJ IDEA. This is the open source free version of IDEA. There's a commercial one as well, which you might be able to get a license for, but I'm doing this on my Mac. The process is analogous on Windows, and once it's downloaded and installed, I can run it. First thing it does is to see if I want to import settings, and I'm just going to say no in this case. And I get to choose which theme I like, light or dark. I'm going to choose light. And do I want to have a script? I don't want to do that. And then some default options. I'm just going to accept all the defaults here. And we'll look for featured plugins. We don't really want to deal with any of those, and so we just let it go. And then we have IntelliJ IDEA, and the first thing I'm going to do is install the plugin. So from that first prompt I can select plugins, and I'm going to get the Python plugin. So by default it doesn't come with support for Python, but IDEA has lots of support, lots of plugins for lots of different languages, and which is what makes it quite a good environment to work with. So once we've installed that, we get to restart the IDE, a whole bit of software, so that the plugin is then available. And once we're running again, we get our new project prompt. Here it is. And so now I'm going to work with this. I'm going to make a new project, and now the Python thing's available, so I get to choose the Python project when I make a new one. Notice there's no interpreter there. We'll come to that. Give it a name. I'm just going to call it sample in this case, and it's going to make this new project for me. And this is a project is a folder on your system. It's not doing anything particularly magic or extra. It puts some settings in there, and in my folder I'm going to make a new Python file, call it main.py, and I'm going to write a little bit of Python code. So we're going to just have a function here, and you notice it says no Python interpreter configured. We'll come to that. Basically it doesn't know yet how it's going to run this code, but it's allowing you to write the code. And notice it does a few things in terms of colorizing your code and helping with layout and prompting you. So this is just a very simple Python program using the sort of Python metaphor, and in the name is main guard. We'll come to that when we talk about Python at some point, and just going to call that function I defined a couple of times. So here now we're going to deal with this issue of I don't have a Python interpreter configured. So I'm going to go to the project structure settings, project structure in the settings here, and look at this SDK, this is software development kit. And as it comes, it only really knows about Java version 11. So we're going to have to tell it about a version of Python that we want to use. Now by default, IntelliJ uses a virtual environment for Python. You can use the system interpreter, but we're going to use and suggest you use a virtual environment. Here it's suggested a name for my environment, which is sample. And what this is basically a local version of Python just for your project or collection of projects. And anyway, that takes a little bit of time. I'll skip through it here. We go back to our project, and you can see at the bottom here it's doing a bit of work. It's indexing and updating skeletons and things like that. There's a progress bar at the bottom until it's actually ready to run your code, and it knows all about the interpreter. Once it's done with all of that, we should actually see this little green triangle next to the if statement. Then if I click that and I say run main, sure enough my code gets run and executed using that Python interpreter. I can modify the code and run it. Notice I don't have to save between it, so it takes care when it's running the code, it saves it for you. And there's another button up there in the top right hand corner that allows you to run it as well. So that setting up of the interpreter is quite important. If you don't do that, then your code ain't going to work. I'm just going to show you another example of opening an existing project. So I've chosen a folder that I have a Python project in, and that's this one here, and this contains an existing one. Now I've actually had this open in an earlier version of IDEA, so it has a few files open already, but again I have to go in and tell it for this project which IDE I want to use. I'm going to choose the one I set up before, but I could also create a new one. just for this project. So it depends. Sometimes you want to create a new one that keeps your virtual environment isolated, but if you have projects in common, then you can use the same interpreter if they're using the same modules, for example. And modules is going to come into play here in this little project. I'm using the bottle module, and you can see here it's underlined in red because it doesn't know what it is, and it prompts you there when I hover over it, install this thing. And so we can see in the top bottom right that it's now installed that package bottle. So that's one way to install packages into the Python environment. Another way is this. So if I actually try and run this code, it's actually going to crash because I've not got all the modules installed. So I try and run it, I get a crash and it says it doesn't know about bottle SQLite. So I'll just show you another way to install modules, which is again in the project structure settings, this time under SDKs, and we choose the system development kit we're looking at, the Python one, and under packages there's a list of packages, and then it gives me this interface to finding things I'd like to install. I can install bottle SQLite, and that's done correctly. Everything's good. You can see it now there in the list of packages that are supported, and now when I rerun it, everything is good. So this is just a quick introduction to the IDEA IDE, IntelliJ IDEA, we'll use for this kind of work. Thank you very much.